Hi, Terry. A long time. And it's morning time over there. Where are you based now?
It's very early for me anyway. I'm in Broomfield, Colorado.
Yeah, and tomorrow onwards, you get a long weekend for your Thanksgiving, right?
We do. I taught middle school from January to June
Hmm.
because I had not yet found work, and I'm still looking for a work position. So I have a long, long, long weekend. So yeah,
Terry, this is an impromptu interaction with you because thanks to you, I am a proud owner of Punishment and Reward
yeah.
by Alfie Kohn. So talk to me about Alfie Kohn and the influence that his writings had on you and your thoughts on that. And this is an impromptu because we never had an agenda. And thank you very much for turning up. And
Sure.
we have been discussing various topics, but this is something that is of interest to me personally. And you were the one who introduced me to Cone, and I got this book, and I've gone halfway through. A little difficult to get through the conceptual part of it, but then it flows. Over to you, Terry.
Uh, I'm not completely sure when I first came across Cone. I think it was in perhaps the year the book came out, actually. We had a bookstore in Boulder, and I had an opportunity to read books that came through our system, and I'm pretty sure that I got a copy of the book at that point and read through it. At the time, my elder son was, let's see, he would have been about 5 or 6 or maybe 7 years old. And so I began learning that stuff, the cone stuff, after he was already conditioned. Whereas my daughter, much less or much later in time, I'd already read that material and other material and was much better versed in the content. And so my son and my daughter had very different upbringings because of my different level of exposure to cone at the time. Um, so I think I was first introduced in the 90s, early 90s, and then in the late 90s, I taught college, and then in 2000, I began teaching in the schools, high school. And I had an opportunity to try to apply some of those methods. And as I was teaching high school, I've discovered Deming's video library, and that's a whole different story. But within that video library is one of Deming's videos that features Alfie Kohn. And so it began sort of this synergistic development of ideas about how we could do teaching differently. I was exposed to quality officially or formal quality improvement in the late 1980s. And the ideas from Imai's book set me on a road of trying to find ways to implement quality improvement in every job I ever had. And Cone brings material that is so confrontational to the norm that it was simultaneously delicious, like it had so many ideas about how to improve what we're doing, but also horrifyingly complicated to implement in general terms because it goes so contrary to the usual school system. So that was sort of my introduction.
Talk to me, Terry, because I was quite fascinated by this book, Punished by Rewards, that I thought you would take me further into Cohn's philosophy as you understood it and as you have been. I know you told me earlier that you have been influenced by Cohn's thoughts. Where have you been able to implement it? Tell us some short stories, anecdotes, so that uh, so that I get impetus to go deeper into cone. I'm quite selfish at that.
I think when I was teaching college, I was handed a course and then I taught the course. So I didn't have to develop a lot of material for that. And the assessments and other portions of what was going on were not up to me. So there's a very strict structure of how to produce that course. But when I got to the high school level, I was in a applied technology classroom or STEM classroom, and it was not well prepared, and the curriculum was not ready, and I had about 10 days to get everything going. But what that means is that in the context of that class, I had control over presentation and assessment. And I don't think I got this from Cohn. I think I got it from Deming, or somehow distilled it from Deming, that rather than have assignments that had letter grades, that I would figure out a way around that system. And so I mostly achieved that by making every assignment, whatever it was, worth 10 points. I was going to use 1 point, but I felt like I couldn't know how I was going to need to adjust it in the future, and that 10 points would give me various kinds of variability that I could put in to indicate what was going on or the progress that students were making on an assignment. So, for instance, maybe they have to use a video or a piece of computer software to get something done, and then they show it to me. And if it's done, whatever that means, then I give them 10 points. And then it kind of grew into, instead of, okay, I can see that you've got this started, but it's not done. And so I'm going to put this one in the temporary score column. And when you're done, I'll change that to a 10. And that is where I began using that kind of system. And it turns out to fit well with Cohn and Deming, that a go no go grade is uh, is far less toxic of a method of assessment than our usual letter grading system. It also is not, it doesn't enable students to fail. If you have a letter grading system, you're enabling the possibility for them to fail. And this got rid of that essentially. And it didn't take much fine tuning to see how much more effective it was. Um, in the one obvious thing is that students don't want to finish a project. So some of my students would say, can't you just give me oh no, let me give you a better example. So a student has a writing assignment about the activity that they completed, and they need to write 2 or 3 paragraphs to put on their own web page. And I come and I look at the web page and I go through and I say, well, okay, I see 5 spelling or grammar errors, and you need to fix those. But I'm not going to tell you what they are. You can ask whoever you want about those, but not me. You can look it up on the internet. You can ask your friends to help you, whatever you want to do. So I'm empowering them to find a solution that doesn't include me. And then they say, can't you just give me a lower grade? I say, yes, I can. I can give you a lower grade. Uh, Incomplete is a lower grade. So for now, it will be a 1. When you get it done, you let me know. I'll come look at it again. And it took surprisingly small amounts of time to get them to bring their product up to speed, up to the final quality. And so they take 4 minutes, and then I go look at it again and grade it, and I thought, yeah, this is done, 10 points. And so their scoring all the way through the semester would be columns of 10 points and columns of maybe they're blank, they haven't gotten started yet, or if there was a one, it was a temporary grade waiting for them to complete something that I saw had been started. That uh, that method had stuck with me till even the present day. Like when I was teaching middle school in January, I used the same exact method. And a lot of the impetus for that came not just from Cohn, but from Peter Schultes and his performance appraisal video. That my primary exposure to Schultes was through Deming's videos at the time, and so I basically it's just a way of getting the students to be accountable for the product that they're producing, which when they get it completed properly gives them uh, pride of no, not pride. What's Deming's term? Uh, oh, I can't think of the term. It'll come to me later, but it's like pride of completing the work completely. And in the workplace, that comes out as from Deming, it comes out as workers know that they're creating bad product, but they're powerless to not do it. And this system by itself motivated or created opportunity for students to complete fully completed work. And at the same time, it connects with Cohn's material about letter grades and how making it a go no grade makes it a non-behavioristic thing. Either it's done or it isn't. It's not a behaviorism. It's not you know, carrot and stick kind of a method. And there's no reward after you get your 10. You just get your 10 and you go on to the next 10 and then you go on to the next one. And there's no reward or punishment involved. And so I would say this though, that it requires, I think, a sense of uh, calm in the delivery. So if somebody is not done with their assignment and I say, oh, you're not done, you got to get this done. I'm going to give you a one. So go get it done. And when you get it done, I'll change the grade. If I have that sort of attitude in my delivery about what's going on, then I have shot the whole thing down. And so it requires just sort of a blasé approach to saying, yeah, you need to get this done. You let me know when you get it done and I'll come back and grade it and that'll be fine. And that was my attitude as I presented it to students. And it's hard to describe that in terms of what we read from Cohn's material, that presence of I don't know, maybe not attachment fits here, but that presence of just calmness and saying, this isn't quite done, let's keep working on it. And then when you get it done, you get your full credit. Um, okay, so this posed a big problem to certain students, especially in middle school and high school. Many students, too many students, have already been disconnected uh, from the system of learning. They're already disenchanted. They're already so demotivated that they are sort of unreachable. So for them to get full credit on an assignment is sort of against their DNA at that point. And so I'm not sure how to navigate that in the totality of education, but what it allowed me to do was to insist on 100% quality, but not completing 100% of the assignments. And so students might work super hard to make sure that they didn't pass the class, or that they barely passed the class. They're not looking to get an A. And so this is part of where my system kind of fell apart a little bit, or at least it's different. It looks different than it really is, or something. I'm not sure. But what I did is each 10-point assignment was an A or full credit for having gotten the assignment done. But we might have had, let's say, 30 assignments, and maybe what do I do if somebody only gets 26 of them done? And so there, I acknowledge to the students that I'm not going to give you letter grades individually, but at the end, I've got to turn something in to show how much work you completed. Now, how much work you completed is still a variable that many students, it may not be up to them how much they get completed. They've got their personal effort to put in, but that's that's I couldn't find a way to navigate around that to remove that element from the behavioristic model. So a student gets 26 of them, then maybe they get a B or something like that. But they got a B based on 100% completion of a bunch of assignments instead of getting a B for getting 85% completion on all of their assignments. So they still have a sense of completion of the work at a 100% level. So that's how I implemented it in the classroom.
One of the things, Terry, you should explain to me, why does Cone say that to praise is also, according to him, a punishment, if I understood him correct? That praising somebody for this thing is a sort of a punishment. I don't know. I couldn't get that part of it.
Okay, so it's it's tricky, and not only is it tricky to really figure it out on its face, it's also tricky to remember how to implement when you grew up in a system that is not the system. Um, so, but what he's saying isn't that he's not saying that praise is a punishment. It's not, that's not the point. The point is that the results are the same as a punishment. So the question then is, well, what results are we looking for? What results do we desire in the environment that we're working in? So in school, what is the goal of a math class, let's say? Is my goal to teach math and have a bunch of kids come out of the class that have learned math skills? Or is my goal to get students interested in learning math? And those two statements, the nature of them is very, very different. I can get children to, let's say, memorize their multiplication table, but the method I use to do that could be toxic or it could be non-toxic. So the the question from Cohn is, what is the effect on motivation? And in particular, he begins to explain to us what's the difference, or what's the difference in value? What's the value add of intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation? Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead to the premise. The premise from Cohn is intrinsic motivation is far, far better than extrinsic motivation. Okay, that's his premise. Why does he have that premise? You could say, well, maybe it's his philosophy or the idea of what he thinks is best, but that's not true. What he's saying is that it's proven with literally all the existing research that intrinsic motivation is better than extrinsic motivation in the long term. In the long term, maybe meaning one day, maybe it's a year, kind of depends on what we're talking about. But the point that he's making is that extrinsic motivation doesn't get the results we want. So you and I, if we have children and our children go to school, we want them to, well, I shouldn't assume what somebody else wants, right? We want them to succeed, but we want them to be happy in their success. Or what kind of cultural norms do we pull on? what do we want for our children when they get out of school? Do we want them to be doctors, or do we want them to make healthy choices? There's all kinds of ideas about what we call success. But we could agree that success is what we want for our children. We're not purposely trying to make our children unsuccessful. So when we measure what happens with the punishment or a reward, we need to be cognizant of what effect that has on a student's success, whatever it is. And from my perspective as a teacher, I want children to be more and more interested in learning into the future. And that's pretty complex. It's a complicated thing to navigate within a school system which is using punishment and rewards. Okay, so let's go back to some detail on that. So, punishment and rewards. Why are punishment and rewards a problem? The problem is that they give us results in the very short term, and then they give us the opposite of those results in the long term. So, if we take, say, we take a classroom and we take our students and we create small groups, and half of the groups, maybe 3 or 4 groups, I say, I want you to see if you can figure out how to solve this tricky problem, and let me know what you come up with. And then the other half of the groups, I set them over here on the side and I say, whoever finishes this problem the fastest gets a gold star. It doesn't really matter what the reward is. It's just the fact that it's a reward, right? Okay, so, and this is proven with adults in industry and all kinds of places, that those kids who know that there's a reward are now aiming for the reward instead of the solution to the problem. Some part of the interactivity in their brain and as a group is getting them to focus on something that's outside of them instead of the enjoyment of trying to solve a problem. A jigsaw puzzle is a great example. Let's say I have a group. These groups are just going to finish a jigsaw puzzle. You guys see how this goes. Or, you know what? I'm going to reward whoever gets this done the fastest. Okay, so if I'm only going to reward the people who are getting it done the fastest, then I've created competition because only one group is going to get a reward. And maybe I can add a punishment in to increase the behavioristic model success and say, well, whoever is last getting it done is going to have to stay after school. Okay, so now I've got a fear element on the one hand and a reward element on the other hand. But both of those, both the reward and the punishment, slide the motivation from the intrinsic side toward the extrinsic side. And they do it in exactly the same way. That's why punishment and rewards are similar, because they both push the nature of motivation out of the intrinsic realm into the extrinsic realm. And that's it.
Well, it's great. The question in the real world, in the sense, I'm not discounting anything what has been said, but with this, the entire society and the way it's working, uh, you know, most of them get educated or get their degree to get an entry, to get a job. So that's where probably all these marks, etc., helps. Even this comparative thing that goes into the current education system, maybe across the globe. I know, especially in India, for example, they require a score. I mean, how does an organization get a cutoff point as to whom to take, whom not to take? I mean, you see that's the real world situation. So I don't know your thoughts on that. I don't know whether the Western uh, side of the planet also have the same issue.
I I've discussed this with various educators, but I suspect that it's worse here than it is there. But I don't know how it is there exactly, so I'm not going to try and support that claim. But um, there's no research anywhere that says that using the behavioristic model is better than intrinsic motivation. Nowhere. So let's say I want to be a veterinarian and I go through a behavioristic model of learning how to be a veterinarian. I will still learn how to be a veterinarian, but I will be less motivated to do it properly because I'm stuck in a behaviorism box. Whereas if I'm in a system which promotes the intrinsic needs and intrinsic desires of the students, the issue isn't whether they do or don't get the good marks. The issue is that those who are intrinsically motivated are inherently more likely to continue learning and learning at a higher level than those who are learning in with grades and marks. But I guess I don't have a but there. That, but what I am saying is that that's a proven thing. It's not an imaginary thing. So getting marks is problematic in various ways, not just the ones that we'd get from Cohn or have explained through Cohn. Marks are inherently anti-Deming because they deny the worker or the student of the satisfaction of knowing they've gotten good work done. So if we look at the marks, especially in college, and we say, okay, here's this semester, here's what you need to learn in this semester. We have all sorts of reasons to know that some students are better prepared than other students to get the content done. Maybe some are from a better family. Maybe some have better background training or they've gotten practice that they've gotten before they've gotten to a class. But whatever the case, some students are better prepared than other students, and the best prepared students are going to get the best marks. Not based on what's going on in the class, just based on the nature of how education works. So the situation of the one of the best examples is the variation that happens in the classroom is that there are students in class who are not from this country who for whom English is a second language if they know English at all. But we're going to expect the same product output from those students as we do for students who speak English. Well, that if we separate elementary school or middle school from college, how do those differ? This college student is more in control of learning all the content needed for the course. They understand what's going on in a way that children don't. So the children who are from another country who don't understand what's going on, they are going to be saddled with bad grades that they have absolutely no control over. Whereas a college student has some amount of control over how much time they put into studying. There's still variation though. So when we look at how Cohn describes schools and punishment and rewards and the effects of the loss of intrinsic motivation in school, we have to then contemplate what is the long-term effect of behaviorism on those students in their preparation for college. And if the loss of intrinsic motivation causes lower performance in college, then we still have the same problem. It's a problem moving from elementary and junior high school into college level. And then who does best in college? those who are, is it just, oh, they're just more motivated, or were they already better prepared for whatever other reason? For my favorite example of that is if we have students whose parents are both concert musicians, those kids are going to they're going to learn how to make music. It's impossible for them to not learn how to make music because it's in the house all the time. Everybody knows how to make music. Does that mean that they have talent in music? Or does it just mean that they were exposed to music all the time and so now they seem to have talent in music? So when we get to the college level, I actually the I don't know what they call actually I don't know anything about how they do this kind of testing in India. Is there a qualifying test to get out of high school?
Uh, there is a qualifying test to get out of of the high school. We have
Yeah.
got 10 years of schooling plus 2 years of what we call junior college, and then you have your graduation, then you have your post graduation, etc. So
Okay, so there's an exit exam. Is there also a different entrance exam to get into college?
there is for engineering colleges, medical colleges in India, which are government colleges. There is a common test across the country. There's a common entrance test for medicine, engineering. There is.
Okay, so this is an interesting topic that's related, not to cone necessarily, but maybe, in that a completion exam, an exit exam, is a kind of uh, defect mitigation, like we would have in manufacturing. We check the product on the way out the door to make sure that it's not defective. An entrance exam is supposed to be an assessment of how well prepared someone is to do the work in front of them rather than behind them. And so the two are very different. Um, Now, one of the differences is that if I do badly on my entrance exam to college, I can go back and continue learning and developing skills, and then I can go try again to get into those schools. Um, but the exit exam, let's say from high school, if I fail the exit exam in whatever way, then I don't get a high school diploma. And then I can't go to work in certain places because I didn't get my diploma. So the exit factor is more of a behavioristic factor than the entrance factor. It's a it's a point of debilitation. It's a point of punishment where it's a very different thing. So when we go to college, actually there's lots of different things we could talk about, but not all of them have anything to do with cone. But there's various things that are just bizarre about differences in people that make there I think we've talked before about the hockey study, and I've been talking about it for decades now, and I reread it recently and have better information. But the hockey study, or it describes something called the Matthew effect, and that is whatever the cutoff date is for high school in Canada. If you are if you were born just after the cutoff date, then you are the youngest person or one of the youngest people in your class. Whereas if your birthday happens just before the cutoff date, then you're the oldest person in your class. And so when you're, say, 9 years old, uh, the people in the classroom, they have very different skill levels and very, aptitudes or whatever else, because some of them just turned 8 and some uh, are about to turn 10. I mean, some just turned 9. Sorry, some just turned 9 and some are about to be 10. Um, and that difference is routinely not accounted for in how we treat students. And so we present curriculum, we present lessons, and who's going to do the better work, the better job or the better work on those lessons? Well, the older kids are way ahead in some ways than the younger kids, and so they're going to do better. This is a point of variation that Cohn acknowledges, but Deming really brings uh, sort of meat to, or Schultes maybe, because these kids are fundamentally differently prepared. Okay, by how much? A lot. And when we talk about the hockey study, we find out that 40% of professional hockey players are born in January, February, and March. Well, that's ridiculous. Or it was ridiculous. And it was unexplainable, and they had to figure out what was going on. And it was completely a bias created by a cutoff date. And the cutoff date has its effect in schools. So if we're treating every kid as though they're the same, we're completely missing the mark, and we're artificially creating bad grades and good grades based on, at least in part, the cutoff date of of kindergarten. And it's bizarre. It's not it that's from Alfie Kohn, not Alfie Kohn. That's from Malcolm Gladwell's book, um, Outliers. But it plays such a huge role in what we're doing in the classroom that it's just it's sort of insane that this is true and that we don't account for it in the schools. So letter grades, while they exist, are not just reflections of what we think they're reflecting. It's not just the students, uh, you know, capability of doing the work. It's not the effort the student puts forth. We think we're grading student effort on everything, but that's not true. There's so many other factors that have nothing to do with student effort and that over which they have no control. And so most of what we're giving in a grade or marks in school is not related to the actual capability of the student. And that's carried into college, and it's also carried into the workplace. Anytime we're doing a performance appraisal, how was the appraiser trained? And were they trained to know any of these things? Or what's the outcome of the performance appraisal? If the performance appraisal says, well, you didn't do this and you didn't do this, and so we're going to take away some of your pay. Well, what? That's a huge thing. Oh, you did so well on these few things that we're going to give you a raise. And now everybody in business is doing the same thing the kids are doing in the classroom. They're chasing the money, they're chasing the raise, and their goalpost has been moved from what could we do to help you be more intrinsically motivated in your work to I have to do this in order to keep getting money. We've removed it, or we've just contaminated the intrinsic motivation of the worker into having a money focus. And that's the same thing as grades happening in the classroom.
Terry, thanks a lot for this. This also reminds me that there are certain patterns that the way I see it, being a parent, and that there's something, there's something called the please me driver that we try to tell the kids as they grow up, do this for me, and then you pat them on the back. So they get into this please me driver to please their parents or what have you. And I wouldn't be very certain whether the same behavior goes on in the schools, the college, and maybe during the employment period. That is something that I'm sure you have, you do have a theory behind that. I mean, I know a little bit of it because of Dr. Eric Burns' influence that I have. But this please me driver is something, and somehow when I was reading Cohn, that's what hit my head that he was talking about to do something that is more manipulative to get the results that the parents wants from the child. rather than what the child wants for himself. Uh, I mean, I have not really go deep dived into Cone, so you are in a better position to explain that to us. And what I intend doing is that I'm going to publish this impromptu interaction with you, and well, you're going to answer this question for me, and then we will have it on the Dr. M's launch, and I'll invite people and let's talk about it. And I'm not, I really don't know in depth the new education policy of Government of India. So what I went through is what I explained to you. There are educators, my wife is one of them, so they will be in a better position to tell us what's happening. So, but then this Please Me driver is something that I have seen, and we still go through that. And I've seen that happening in the college, this, right up to the organizational level. Sherry.
Um, it's it's part of behaviorism. It's part of what Kohn is talking about, obviously. But one of the questions he asks is, why do we do that? Why are we doing that? And the single biggest cause of us doing that is that that is what we have all seen done. In fact, it with all of animalia, I used to say mammals, but it turns out it's true of all animals. Animals, the single best, most effective way for any animal to learn anything is by example and by watching, specifically by watching. So we are incredibly deeply hardwired to watch what somebody else does and then emulate that. We we as we go through college and learn to learn things in different ways, we could maybe read a book to learn how to do something, but it's not going to be anywhere near as effective on average as us watching someone do it and then doing it and then getting critiqued by that person about how we did that. Now, I'm going to make a bold claim that's maybe not true, but I feel like workers in plumbing and electricians, they have journeymen, they have people learning to get in there, and then they have masters. But when you're just learning to do plumbing and you're learning to do electrician, you could maybe watch videos, that could be effective, but you watch a master doing what they're doing, and then you do it, and then they critique your work right then. But like my grades that are go, no go grades, that message can be delivered with zero emotional content. So, okay, you did a good job on this part of the plumbing, but really you need to remember that you've got to do this part of the plumbing. Let's do it again. Okay? And you get to do it again, and you get to do it again. And it doesn't matter how many times. No one has to care how long it takes you to learn how to do that, and you get proficient. Now you're a proficient plumber with zero negativity involved. Now, I'm making a crazy claim. I can't guarantee that the person training that other person is has zero negativity. I can't I can't claim that, right? But in my imagination, I'm saying these people can get all these skills. It may take them a different amount of time, but they're going to get these skills. And they can do that with zero negativity, but they can also do it with zero positivity. You don't have to say, hey, that's a great job. Now let's move on to the next one. You don't have to say that. And that is the distinguishing factor between praise and reward. Is all praise problematic? I don't think it is. But how much praise does it take for it to become problematic? Okay, now, so knowing that all people on this planet, almost all people on this planet have been subjected to the behavioristic model, and it didn't start with behaviorism. It didn't start with Skinner. It started maybe, I don't know, 10,000 years ago. So I don't know when this idea of carrot and stick started, but I know it's far older than we would acknowledge, and it's everywhere. It's almost everywhere that people do things this way, with including with praise. So, but Cohn specifically addresses this with um, it. It's his other book, or it's another one of his books, Unconditional Parenting. When we assess how we're going to do the next activity with our children, are we making it more or less positive or negative based on what just happened? If we are, then that's a conditional thing. And so Cohn's example is his daughter did something that was not appropriate. I can't remember what it was, but their habit was to read a book at night every night. And so his quandary was one night, his daughter had done something that wasn't appropriate. Do we still read a book that night? And if we don't read the book that night, then that becomes a conditional thing rather than so it's the and when a child is younger, it's much more an identity factor of, am I loved? Does my parent love me? And if I don't read the book tonight because I'm upset about what you did today, or that's my excuse anyway, then I'm taking away the nature of unconditional love. And now it's conditional, and now it's transactional, and now that turns it into the please me thing. Um, I I think as a parent, it's just not that hard to just be unconditionally loving, but it is hard to let go of behaviors. And my story around that was about my daughter when my son was grown by the time I learned a lot of this, so he didn't benefit from my increase in my knowledge, but my daughter did. And when she was in, I think, seventh grade, and I remember telling you this before, but I told her, look, I don't believe in grades, so it would be really weird for me to put any important value on your grades. So I just don't need you I don't need to see your grades anymore, like ever. I know what the problems are. I explained to her what the problems were, how sometimes grades don't represent really your ability, but maybe learning or who knows what. And so I just don't really care anymore. You don't need to tell me your grades anymore. And she said, well, my mom doesn't see it that way. I'm like, that's true. She doesn't. But I'm telling you from my perspective, I don't need to see your grades. And she said, okay. So some time passed and she came home one day and she sauntered in, and she would do this sometimes. She would be subtle about the fact that she was going to, you know, get one over on me, sort of. And she said, so she kind of sauntered in with her envelope. I got my grades. And I'm like, oh, really? And I knew right away that something was coming that I wasn't going to expect. So I like, well, let me see them. And so I took the envelope and I looked out. They have 5 A's and a B. And I looked at it. I said, wow, and I froze and I'm just staring at it. I'm not moving my head and I'm just looking at it. And I just tell her, look, I need to apologize. Uh, you need to realize that I've been trained my whole life to value these, and I know that you know better, and that these have no meaning really. And so I need to apologize that I was about to praise you for this, uh, and I hope you forgive me. And then I looked up at her and she said, "Okay then." And she had prompted me on purpose to see what my reaction would be, and I had failed but then recovered. And it's some parents have a difficult time apologizing to their children about what they've done. Like maybe they did something that they wish they had done differently or they could have done better as a parent. When you apologize to your child about what you've done, or you maybe warn them, like, I'm upset about something that happened at work, you just know that it has nothing to do with you. Now you've removed the stress from being part of their identity and being a situational thing. That too is a is a side story of unconditional parenting. And unconditional parenting is is the core. It's the core of their identity. It's the core of how they're going to see the world. And so when we say, "Hey, well, when you finish eating your vegetables, then we can go to the park." Um, and man, it's so natural that it's frightening to just say that without realizing that, oh, we're making this conditional rather than saying, "Hey, are you done with your vegetables? Do you want to save them for later? What do you want to do? Because let's go to the park." It, and I think part of it is that we have this natural sense of we need to have control over our children. We need to make sure they behave appropriately, or we need to have control over the students in our classroom. And that control means more to us than them learning. Yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah, Terry, honestly, that's everywhere. And as you were talking, I was recollecting my behavior towards my kids. And to be honest with you, I think I should have read codes much, I think probably 50 years before. Anyway, thanks a lot for being here with me. And I'm sure you would be on Dr. M's launch and we'll talk it across to many of those who are interested in this topic that we are talking about. And thank you very much again. I'm going to stop recording. Take care.